A good plan is the most important factor in creating a good landscape. That's because it takes most do-it-yourselfers between 3 and 5 years to finish a big landscape. Well, first of all, it takes more than just a couple of weekends. Second of all, the plants and materials alone can run into the thousands of dollars, so it gets spread out over a few years.
The first consideration is the style of landscaping that will work best with your property. This house has kind of a cozy look to it, and our landscape architect has picked up on that in the design.
That's where the beds have curves rather than straight lines, and where the plants seem to be placed almost at random. That's all very carefully planned, though. You'll see it come together later on the tape, but right now, let's take a look at a finished example of an informal landscape. This video shows a newly planted garden done in the English garden style. It was designed to harmonize with the architecture of the home, and it features mass plantings of shrubs and perennials with no formal borders between them.
Compare that to this garden, which shows the formal style of straight lines and perfect geometrical shapes. Featured here are a garden house, patio, and concrete stairs, which create a classical garden next to the house. The highlight is an aerial hedge, which follows the arc at the end of the patio. Here the plantings seem orderly, not random, and they're closely managed and pruned to maintain the formal effect. Okay, let's assume that you've decided which styles you like best. Your next consideration is what you want your landscape to do for your house and yard, besides make it look nicer. Here's where you want to start thinking about the function you want your landscape to perform, like creating new areas for play and leisure, increasing privacy, and blocking the sun, wind, or street noise. You should also think about ways to improve the view of your house from the street by framing it better or highlighting the entryway. But don't forget about the views from inside the house. If you have large windows or French doors, think about how you can improve the views you now have through them. The same would apply if there's a porch, patio, or a deck. If there's no outdoor seating area, you might include one in your new plan and then work on the view you'd have from that area. Finally, check out the rest of your neighborhood and try to imagine how your ideas would blend in with the other yards. There's a certain value in keeping a visual continuity between the houses, so you might think twice about anything that's wildly different. In fact, you might want to incorporate some of your neighbors' ideas in your own yard to promote continuity.
If you do that, then you'll be starting to think like a designer. But you also have to be thinking about some of the other materials that designers work with, the trees, shrubs, and flowers that actually make up the landscape. If you're going to plan your own landscape, you'll need a pretty good idea of which ones will work in your climate. Trees, shrubs, and flowers are all categorized by their plant hardiness, which means how well they perform in different climate extremes. North America has been divided into 10 climatic zones in the plant hardiness zone map put out by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, with Zone 1 the coldest and Zone 10 the warmest. National plant reference guides and nursery catalogs will list the plant hardiness by zone. So once you determine the climatic zone you live in, you can figure out which of the plants will thrive in your part of North America. Your local nurseries will, of course, stock plants that are hardy to your climate. And if they do carry any non-hardy plants, they'll alert you to the special care those plants need to survive in your climate. In addition to the climate factor, there's also the sun factor for trees, shrubs, and flowers. Some need full sun, some need full shade, and they won't thrive in the opposite extreme. So plant guides and catalogs will also list the plant's sun or shade requirements, and that's something you have to consider in your planning.
The catalogs and guides also list the plant size at maturity, which is critical for proper spacing on your plan and in your yard. And this catalog also lists the time of year when the flower or shrub is in bloom, and that's a consideration when you're trying to maintain color in your yard through the entire growing season. The main thing to be concerned about is what your trees, shrubs, and flowers look like. Now, if you're like me, you look through one of these catalogs, you find dozens of things that you like, and then later on you forget what they were or where you found them. So we think it's a good idea to get extra copies of the catalogs if you can, and actually cut out the pictures of the plants you think might fit into your landscape. And cut out the plant descriptions, too, so you know at a glance all the important facts. This step won't really help if you're just going to put in 20 lilac shrubs, all of the same variety. But it will help you keep a range of trees, shrubs, and flowers in mind if you plan to mix quite a few into your new landscape.
All right, we've got you thinking about landscape plants, styles, and functions. Now we want to turn those thoughts into a workable landscape plan.
Before doing any drawing, you'll need to measure out the dimensions of the yard and the house, as well as any permanent features like the garage, the driveway, sidewalks, fences, patios, decks, and existing trees or shrubs you plan to keep. The next step is translating those features to paper using an 1/8 inch scale, which means an 1/8 inch on paper equals a foot out in the yard.
If your drawings look a little amateurish, don't worry. Just so long as the measurements are accurate and you can read everything when you're done, that's really all that matters.
Let's say that you've got your yard drawn and you want to try out some ideas on your new landscape. One tip that we've learned is to use tracing paper at this point so you don't have to redraw the yard over and over again. Now what I've drawn here is a hypothetical house and yard. It might not look like your yard, but as we step through a couple of likely plans for this house, we'll highlight the basic principles you can use in your yard. Let's start with an informal style. We'll first frame the front of the house with taller plants anchoring the corners. For example, a shade tree like an ash on one side and an ornamental tree like a flowering crab on the other. Not exactly symmetrical, but that's typical of informal landscapes. By the way, spreading these out a couple of feet will make a small house seem a bit bigger. The entry would be framed on each side with a group of taller deciduous shrubs like mock orange, reaching a height of 5 to 6 feet. Now a series of medium-sized shrubs along the foundation would cover any exposed block. One option would be spreading junipers, maturing at a height of 3 to 4 feet. Again, we don't want these too orderly to keep that informal style. To finish the beds off, we would use a series of short shrubs like spirea, mostly to round off the outside edges. And then we'd fill in here with a mass planting of perennials like a stilbe. The finished plan shows how carefully planned the informal layout really is, despite the random look that it presents. Notice how we built each bed with the short plants in the front, the medium plants in the middle, and the taller plants in the back. Now that's a basic rule you should follow to keep all your plantings visible from the front.
Now we'll take the same basic house plan and treat the landscape a bit more formally. We're starting here with a low formal hedge. Alpine currant would be a nice choice, trimmed in this case to a height of 2 feet. We'd want to see pretty straight lines and square corners here, nothing rounded or curved. We'd frame the entry with a pair of upright conical evergreens, possibly Techni arborvitae. Along the foundation, we'd continue the geometrical sequence with a globe-shaped medium-sized shrub. One option would be a Japanese yew. For color, we'd fill in the middles of the beds with tall perennials that would be visible above the hedge. Daylilies come to mind for that. To finish this treatment, we'd anchor the corners of the house with a pair of ornamental trees, maybe a couple of flowering crabs, pruned to hold a globe shape. Well, this example shows the main features of a formal layout: straight lines, geometrical shapes, and a sense of balance or symmetry. We're not landscape designers, so we're not saying like these are great plans or anything, not at all. We're just trying to give you an idea of what to think about as you start jotting down your landscape plans. Well, we're using garden hoses to lay out our planting beds here. They're flexible, so they work real well on laying out these irregular areas. We want everything to look sort of random once it's all planted. At the same time, a lot of thought goes into exactly how we're doing this.
The nursery sent out these little rulers. They convert the 1/8 inch scale on the plan to feet, so it makes it easier to get our measurements. Like off the corner of this house, we want to get this curve here, so we take 3 measurements off the plan. We go 90 degrees off the corner of the house, and we get 11. Then we go 45 degrees, and we get 13. And another 90 degrees, and we get 9. Now we put stakes in at those points and loop the hose around to match this curve.
All right, how's this looking, do you think?
Good.
You all set there?
Yep.
Okay, well, now that we have all the beds laid out, we're going to cut our sod down to the topsoil. Now, Robin's been edging around the outside here with a square nose spade. So to cut out the sod, we're going to be using our sod kicker here. It has this little blade that goes down to the depth of the roots of the sod. So it's just a matter of getting this blade started and then kicking it along as you go.
Well, we've got all the beds laid out and cleared, and we're ready to install this plastic edging. Now, this isn't absolutely necessary, but it makes a good barrier for keeping the grass from invading the beds.
It's made out of plastic with this round bead on the top that stays above the surface. This separates out the planting beds. And this web here, the bottom portion, let me get this up here, this web portion gets buried under the ground. And these grooves tend to anchor the edging in the ground since the edging has a tendency to work itself out of the ground during winter frost heaves.
Sometimes this edging can be a little stiff or twisty if it comes in a coil. So you might want to lay it out in the sun for a few minutes until you're ready to work with it.
While the strips have been warming up out in the sun, I've been digging a trench here to bury the edging. I'm going down 6 inches, which should do a good job in accommodating the depth. Now, the depth of the edging itself will vary, with more expensive stuff going 4 to 6 inches into the ground. If your winters bring a lot of freezing weather, try to get the deepest edging available, because that resists heaving a lot better.
I've seen this edging come in strips 60 feet long, but these 20-footers are pretty common. Can you grab that for me?
Yeah, I got it here.
Okay, once it's manageable, you just put it into the trench with the bead the same height as the lawn.
Well, once we have the edging in the trench, it's a good idea to stake it in place. And we do that at each one of the ends in about every 10 feet or so. Then we can brush some of the dirt back in and cover up the bottom of the edging. Well, we got all of our edging in, and we were able to fill in sod over in this empty area with some of the sod that we took out right over here. And now's a real good time to make any amendments to the soil in terms of drainage or chemical composition. I'll tell you, with what we're working here, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, all we're doing is adding black dirt to build up the soil against the house and then slope it down away from the house. This keeps rainwater from pooling up against the foundation. With a big project like this, it's not a bad idea to have a couple yards of black dirt on hand.
If you're stuck with some miserable-looking topsoil, you can improve it by adding some black dirt to it, compost, or peat moss, which is what we're going to need here.
At this point, we're not figuring a lot of flowers, but in this bed, we're putting in a ground cover known as Pachysandra. Now, the nursery recommends that we first prepare the soil by mixing in about 4 inches of peat moss.
What it'll do is just keep the soil nice and loose so the roots of the ground cover can spread out real nicely and evenly.
We started planting our first bed by putting in the biggest shrub, a winged euonymus. You always want the largest shrubs in place first to establish their positions before setting the smaller ones around them. After that, we were ready for the bare root forsythia that we laid out as a hedge in that same bed.
If you've never planted bare root shrubs before, then pay close attention, because they're different from planting any other form. First of all, you want to take a plant off the bundle, just one at a time, and then cover the rest back up so they don't dry out. And then before putting them in the hole, cut about a 1/4 inch off the end of each root. And this is to promote new growth.
You want the hole about 6 inches wider and 6 inches deeper than the roots themselves, so these holes aren't exactly going to be massive. You also want the crown of the plant, that's the area right where the roots start, to be right at the surface level.
Okay, that should do it. As soon as you get the right depth, you want to make a mound of dirt on the bottom of the hole for the root mass to sit on. Now, it should be high enough so that the crown is just above ground level, or 2 to 4 inches higher if you're planning on having mulch. How's that?
A stick laying across the hole will help you determine how high it should be. Okay, it looks pretty good there.
Then you fill the hole halfway with soil. Pour water over that to help it settle. These are going to need a lot of water the first week, and this is just the first drink.
Well, now's a good chance to reposition the plant and then
bring in the rest of the soil and just place it nice and firmly up against the roots. And these are really the basic steps in planting bare root stock.
As a final step, they say it's essential to heavily prune the plant to help reduce the shock of replanting. They recommend cutting about 1/3 to 1/2 of all the branches off. But since this plant is going to be pruned as a hedge, we'll wait until they're all planted and then prune them all at the same time.
Well, the strange thing about bare root stock is you can compact so many plants together in one little area like this. In fact, we were talking to one of the guys at the nursery, and he was saying people will call up to order 3 plants. By the time they get into their house, they think they've got just 1 plant, and they'll end up sticking 3 of them into one hole.
We've moved ahead and got all the forsythia planted. What I'm doing now is trimming them off as recommended. You want your hedges to be wider on the bottom than they are at the top, slanted on both sides, so you cut them at an angle. This promotes leaf growth throughout the entire plant. It makes a nice full hedge. Now, it doesn't look like we're doing much because the plants are so small, but it's good to start training a hedge right off the bat.
Well, we're going to fill in our center area here with a perennial ground cover called Pachysandra. It doesn't take a lot of sun, which is good because it's not going to get much in this area. Now, the nice thing about these is planting them, it isn't quite as technical as the bare rootstock.
Now you're going to see more and more ground cover like this used in landscape. It's already popular in shady areas where grass doesn't grow well. It's also really low maintenance compared to grass.
Yeah, lawn can be a little bit of a hassle. Robin says there's all the mowing, and then you have to water and fertilize it. Although this is quite a bit more work up front than just rolling out a few rolls of sod, I think in the long run this is definitely a lot less maintenance.
Now we're going to move on to the large bed in the front and show you how to plant trees that come from the nursery with their root balls wrapped in burlap.
We've heard a lot of different suggestions on how big to dig the hole for trees. Now, the nursery sent along these instructions, which should be pretty accurate because they guarantee their plants 100%. They recommend digging the hole 6 inches wider than the root ball. For the depth, they say that the top of the root ball should be 3 to 4 inches above ground level if you're adding mulch. If not, it should be just a little higher than ground level.
Now, you really don't want to eyeball these things. What you can do is take a board, lay that across the hole, and then measure down from it. Okay, what do we got here? 9.5. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is dig the hole, throw the ball in, and then find out that it isn't quite deep enough. It can be a little difficult to get back out. You want to help me muscle this thing in?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Just, oh boy, have to get underneath that a little bit more.
Okay, here.
There we go. Boy, those spines are sharp,
Yeah,
aren't
there.
they?
Okay, here. Go. Make sure it's straight. Does it look straight or
not
looks
quite.
a little crooked? Okay. The burlap's biodegradable, so you can actually leave it on after planting, except on the top. You should pull it back there to expose the surface and fold the burlap down the sides. Otherwise, it'll wick moisture away from the ball.
Now, you just start filling up the hole here with dirt about halfway up the root ball. At this point, you might be tempted to fertilize, but you don't want to do that on trees the first year. Fertilizer just encourages leaf growth. The first year on trees, you want to encourage root growth.
Regular fertilizers can also burn the roots, but there are slow-release fertilizers that work over a 3-year period. The nursery sells them in these packets, and they're developed by the University of Wisconsin, and you just throw them right into the planting hole. Now, that's if you're concerned about your soil's nutrients, but we're not. Ours is fine.
If you've got a heavy clay soil, some growers recommend mixing this backfill with peat moss to create kind of an intermediate zone for the roots to grow through between the good nursery soil and the hard clay. But usually, your existing soil is going to be just fine.
Once the hole is filled up halfway, you want to soak it real good with water. This packs down the soil and makes sure that the roots are getting adequate moisture. And to remove any air pockets, just jab the hose in and out of the soil around the root ball. It looks funny, but it'll help the roots.
Now at this point, if things are looking a little lopsided, you can do some adjustment, but actually this looks pretty good, so just fill in the rest of the dirt.
Well, now that we have the hole filled, we're forming a basin around the root ball with the extra soil. This will pool water over the root ball, which needs a lot of moisture the first week.
Well, once the basin's all set, then you can water it to soak the root ball real well. You don't have to worry about overwatering the first week. If anything, you have to worry about not getting enough moisture.
Well, now that you have an idea of how to plant a balled and burlap tree, we've got about 6 more to put in. So I'm going to go ahead and measure those, and then we can dig them.
After planting all the trees, we also did a little pruning to help them grow a bit better. It's not mandatory, but thinning out the branches means fewer leaves to support and more energy for the roots to establish themselves. Before digging any more holes, we did a test run on the next batch of shrubs by setting them in place as shown in the plan. This is a good idea on any landscape because you can see how the plants look together and you can correct any spacing mistakes. Once you're satisfied, mark the positions, pull the shrubs back, and start digging.
Okay, will you check that for me? That's a lot closer. The steps involved in planting a balled and burlap shrub are basically the same as what we told you yesterday for planting trees, starting with the hole being 6 inches wider than the ball.
And where the ball sits in the hole depends on whether or not you're going to mulch. In this area, we're going to be putting in 4 inches of mulch. So when everything's all said and done, we want the top of the mulch to be level with the top of the root ball.
How does that look?
Pretty good. Let me get my
Is it leaning too much?
Now we just pull this twine off and then peel back the burlap to expose the top like we did on the trees.
Okay, I can finish this. It's not really necessary to add fertilizer for shrubs either, but you could put in a slow-release fertilizer at this point. Now we just backfill it halfway, water it, finish backfilling it, and then form a basin on the top. Well, that's good enough. You don't have to spend that much time getting a perfect basin, believe me. So now I'm ready for some water.
We'll be pruning the shrubs just like we did the trees, but we'll wait until everything's in the ground. The next thing to go in now are these spirea. These are container grown, but digging the hole is the same as doing the balled and burlap. You want it 6 inches wider than the container, and a depth that leaves the surface of the root ball just a little higher than the finished surface of the bed.
The main difference with container plants is that you need to take the container off the root ball. For smaller plants like this, these 1 or 2 gallon that we have, place your hand on the root ball around the crown to support the plant. Tip it upside down and tap the sides of the container until it's loosened up. Take the container off the root ball, right like that, but don't drop the root ball, you could damage it. These container-grown roots tend to grow in circles. So before planting, take a knife and make 4 or 5 vertical cuts like this to get the roots growing out again. Then it's ready to go in the hole.
Okay, we're all set.
Now, the rest is the same as for balled and burlap shrubs. Backfilling, watering, and building a basin for water above the root ball.
Well, be sure to check the moisture on these before you plant them. If they're too dry, when you flip them upside down, they could fall apart. In fact, it's a good idea the night before to take all your container-grown plants and water them so they're all set to go the next day. Now, these range in sizes from 1 to 7 gallons. Now, the larger ones, you're not going to be able to just flip upside down and hold on when they're going to be too big. So as an example, lay them on their side, tap the sides of the container, and then just slide the container off. About like that. Go ahead and cut the root ball. You're all ready to plant them. Well, we planted all of our shrubs yesterday. Now we just have a couple of things left to do. One is to cover all of our planting beds in 4 inches of hardwood bark mulch.
One of the main reasons for adding mulch is to discourage weed growth in between your trees and shrubs. With an organic mulch like this, you need to add a full 3 or 4 inches to stifle the weeds. Otherwise, they just keep popping back up without any trouble at all.
Now, one thing about organic mulch is that it does decompose over time, so you have to do a little replacing every now and again. Another option is rock mulch, but there you have to put some type of weed barrier underneath so the weeds aren't sprouting up through the rocks. And make sure you don't use plastic because then water can't get through to the plants. Instead, use something like landscape fabric that still allows water to soak through.
We're leaning toward organic mulch because in hot weather, it keeps the soil relatively cool, and it holds its moisture better than rock mulches, so we don't have to water as often.
We want the mulch to pretty much reflect the contours of these basins, keep water pooling over the roots. And remember, we planted all these pretty high, so the crown of each plant is just a little bit above the surface of the finished mulch. Okay, that's what we mean by that.
Here.
That's good there.
How's that?
Yeah, just maybe that for extra. Perfect.
Okay.
To get started on a concrete paver project, you want to carefully lay out an area to excavate that's 6 inches larger in each direction than your finished patio or sidewalk.
To check the corners for square, we measure diagonally across the space. If the two diagonals are the same, the corners are square. And before we do any digging, we have the utility companies mark the locations of any underground pipes or wires.
Once everything is staked out, we begin to dig. We're using a sod cutter to give a nice clean edge. Then we need to go down at least 7 inches. This leaves the right amount of room for the 4-inch base, a layer of sand, and the pavers themselves. The most important thing about the digging we're doing here is that we're trying not to disturb the dirt at the bottom of the hole. This is called skimming. In other words, what we don't want to do is to have loose dirt at the bottom, because after the patio is built up, it'll settle a little and we might end up with a dip in the patio.
With a patio this size, we could dig the whole thing out by hand, but we've decided to bring in a contractor for the real heavy digging. If your excavator doesn't deal much with paver installations, you'll want to be real specific about what you want. Probably the most important thing, just like when we were hand digging, is to scrape out the dirt without disturbing the ground underneath. If he goes too deep, don't let him try to fill it back in and smooth it out.
However, we're running into a typical problem here. It's spring, and it's been kind of rainy here for the past couple of days, so the soil is soft and spongy, and the bottom of the excavation is getting kind of messy. To make up for this, we're going to start bringing some of the base material into the area. The base material will start to solidify the soft, wet soil. This way, he'll be able to drive the bobcat through the area without leaving big ruts. The base material doesn't start being effective until it's been compacted, so we're running the compactor over it now. Well, hopefully, what this is doing is compacting the base material and helping the soil underneath to settle. You see, the house is only about 4 years old, and the dirt we're working on may not have had enough time to settle. And anytime you uncover dirt, well, you run the risk that suddenly it may decide it's time to settle. That's why we're compacting it now. It's especially important to compact the soil along the side of the house. What happens next to the house is that the overhang of the roof has kept the ground there from getting wet and settling. Also, in this part of the country, the ground right next to the house may never freeze up during the winter. That's because it's being kept warm by the heat from the basement, and it's the freezing and thawing that helps settle the ground. We rented the compactor for 3 days, and it's costing us about $130. We'll use this to compact the base material and to set the pavers, the very last step. Make sure you get a 4 to 5 horsepower compactor. Anything smaller just isn't going to cut it. This compactor vibrates at 2 frequencies. The low frequency high force setting is for compacting the base material. Later, we'll switch it over to the high frequency low force setting for compacting the pavers into the sand.
Now we check the area for 2 things, flatness and slope. We've got a long straight 2x6 and we slide this around to find any humps or dips. If we scrape up or fill any areas, we make sure to compact them before we move on to the next step.
To check for the right slope or grade, we put a 2-inch leg on the end of an 8-foot 2x6. This is the grade we want at the bottom. A 1-inch drop for every 4 feet. Now, if the grade is right, then the top of the board will be level.
Where is it? Okay. Okay.
Well, now that we've stabilized the excavation with some base, we can go ahead and add some more base. But before we do that, we're going to make some marks here so we know how much we should add. So we snapped a chalk line here along the foundation. We're going to use a magic marker to make it a little bit more permanent. See, what are the V's for?
Well, this way, when the base material covers the line, we can see how much we've got to compact it or rake it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Well, I'm going to grab some fabric.
Okay.
There's one last thing we want to do before we spread out the main load of base material. This is called geotextile fabric.
Right spot there.
If there's any movement in the soil under the patio, the fabric will actually help hold up the base and the patio. So once this is in, we'll start putting in the base material on top of it. The fabric should go up the side of the excavation. You'll need to slice it to get it to lay flat at the corners. Also, run it a little bit up the side of the house and tape it in place. This will help protect the siding.
In places where you may need to make a seam, make sure you overlap the pieces by at least a foot.
Well, to compact this material properly, it has to be just a little bit wet. Sometimes it'll come off the truck just fine. Other times it'll be a little bit too wet, other times a little bit too dry. A good way to test this is to grab a clump of it and see if it'll hold together in your hand. Now that's fine. If it's too dry, it'll just fall apart. If it's too wet, it'll ooze water as you squeeze it. If it is too dry, you'll have to put a sprinkler on it for a while. If it's too wet, just let it dry out for a while. Well, why don't you give us about 15 or 20 minutes, and we should be ready for the rest, all right? Unless you've got some really heavy equipment, it's hard to compact more than 3 or 4 inches of loose material at a time. So we're going to get all this raked out, leveled in, we'll compact it, and we'll be ready for the next load.
First, I run the compactor around the edges of the area twice. Then I start on the low side and work across the grade, moving uphill. Once I've run it all the way to the house, I change direction 90 degrees and start going up and down. Next, I do a diagonal pass. Then I repeat the whole process again. Same 3 passes, same directions.
We've been talking a lot about this base material, but haven't said exactly what it is. Well, it's different in different parts of the country. What we're using is 100% crushed limestone, as recommended by the National Stone Association. It's got an even mix of sizes, a maximum size each piece of 3/4 of an inch all the way down to very fine particles. So sometimes it's called 3/4 minus. Around here we call it class 2.
Well, we're having our Bobcat operator bring in the rest of the base. Now, in contractor lingo, we're doing this in 2 lifts. Each lift is 3 inches deep. And we try to order just enough material so by the time everything's compacted, we have a base that's 4 inches deep.
Okay, well, it's all up to us now. We're using the same steps for the second lift of the base material. I'm just evening it out, and then Dean's going to come through with a compactor and use the same pattern and the same number of passes.
To start laying out our patio, we need to mark a line for the end of the patio and a reference line. To draw the end line, we measure out from the house the length of the patio and mark the base in 2 spots. Using spray paint and a paver, we can get a sharp line on the base. Then we snap a chalk line between the 2 marks to give us the bottom of the patio. Now we need to draw a line perpendicular to it. And we'll use a simple technique that resembles an exercise from a high school geometry class. First, we mark the center point on the end line. Then we measure and mark out an equal distance to either side of the center point. We're measuring out 6 feet. It's not crucial exactly how far you measure out, although the longer, the better. And you must measure out exactly the same dimension on each side of your center mark.
Now we use 2 tape measures to establish a perpendicular line. We run the first tape from one of our outside marks up at a diagonal. Then we run a second tape measure from the other outside mark crossing the first tape. We pivot the second tape until the tapes cross each other at the same measurement.
Now, when we snap a chalk line from the center mark on the end line to the point where the 2 tapes cross, we'll be perpendicular to the end line. If we had needed to center the patio exactly on the house, we would have done this marking before we built up the step area. So exactly where and when you make the marks for your project will depend on the layout.
For any concrete paver project, you need some type of edge restraint. Now, in the past, we've used wood, but wood is real difficult to secure in a way so that it won't move around a lot. So for this project, we're using a PVC edge restraint. Now, this is developed specifically for interlocking pavers, like the concrete pavers we're using on this project.
The edging comes in 10-foot sections, so it comes with this connector pipe to join the pieces.
Got that in there?
There we go.
To install these, we'll be using 10-inch spikes. These are 3/8 inch wide, and we'll be nailing them in to every other hole.
For now, we're only putting the edging in along the outside edge of the patio. We'll be putting the edging in on the sides as soon as we get the pavers all laid out. You'll see that sometimes it works best to put the edging in first, sometimes it works best to put the pavers down first.
Before we bring in the sand, we need to mark where the reference line falls on the edging and on the steps. This way we'll be able to re-snap the line after we've covered it with sand.
We're using 2 cubic yards of sand for a 1-inch bedding layer over the whole patio. This much sand weighs about 3 tons, depending on how wet it is. That's too much weight for our truck to handle all at once, so we're going to have to bring it in a few loads.
You going to pull ahead a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, these pipes here will give the sand the correct 1-inch depth. Now, when you pull the sand off the top, that's called screeding, and the pipes are called the screed rails. This one down. Well, the pipes need to be 1 inch in diameter, outside diameter. So be sure to check the size before you borrow or rent them. Now, this pipe is 3/4 inch inside diameter water pipe. If I cover the pipes with sand now, this will help keep them from rolling around. And then I scrape it off the top of the pipe with a shovel. As you go along, you want to pick up any good-sized particles of base material so they don't get lodged underneath the paver. But what I'm doing now is just trying to get the general overall level of the sand here before I start to screed it.
You can't just use any sand for the bedding layer. This is coarse, washed concrete sand.
Throw this in here. Okay, now we're all ready to level it out here. We cut it 2x6, so it's 6 inches longer than each side of our screed rails. So to level this out, we just pull our screed right across our rails. Okay, yeah, we're just a little bit. Let's get some right in there. That should pretty much do it. By pulling that across the screed rails, you can see it gets everything nice and level. I'm going to grab a trowel.
Okay. We set up 4 screed rails, but there are some places that you can't get to with the screeds, so we're going to use a trowel to flatten it out.
So with the trowel, I'll just level off the area that I've already established here, the screed board, and I want to just kind of scrape across the top, maintaining the same level. I don't want to compact this sand at all. If you're a little short, add some sand. If you have too much, pull it out. Just maintain the same exact area. All right, then we just keep on leveling.
It's important to keep the screed perpendicular to the rails, otherwise you could mess up the slope of the sand.
We need a little bit more sand right there. Okay. We're creating what's called a bedding course of sand, not a leveling course. In other words, we're not using the sand to level out any unevenness in the base. It's a 1-inch layer of sand for bedding the pavers only. If the sand layer is uneven because it's been used for leveling, it'll compact differently in different areas and will expand and contract with weather conditions differently. You'll end up with an uneven patio.
For a patio like this, you should use screed rails that are between 5 and 10 feet long, but even these 10-footers aren't long enough to go all the way to the end of the patio without moving them. So we need to slide the guide rails down to the end and finish screeding. Okay, well here's our reference line again on top of the sand, which means we're ready to set our pavers on the main part of the patio. We're going to start at the end and work our way toward the house.
Well, we have a row of red pavers going in along the outside edge here. We call those a soldier course, and those are the first ones to go in. So I've thrown a few pavers on either side of the line here. Now, one thing about these pavers is they have these spacers. When you put these against a flat surface, they have a tendency to rock to one side. So after you lay in 5 or 6, just kind of look down and make sure everything's all in a line. That's use a couple of those. Here, let me grab 3 off the top there. All right, well, we started using the red blend paver, and we're also starting to go with the herringbone pattern. Basically, to do a herringbone pattern, you start with a vertical, you go to the horizontal, and then you take half a paver. Now, we ended up cutting these in half, but there are areas in the country where you can order factory pieces. They're referred to as factory halves or factory edgers. But in our case, like I say, we cut them in half. When you do cut it in half, I always put the cut half against either the change in pattern or the change in color. So I'll pop that one in there, and then we're back to vertical, horizontal, and again, another half paver. Go.
You just set the pavers gently into the sand. Don't slide them in from the side. Don't twist them. Don't push them down. Our general pattern is to set the pavers in sort of a pyramid, centered on a reference chalk line. And it works best if only one person sets pavers at a time. The other person can bring the pavers into the work area.
And try not to walk near the unrestrained edges. It'll tend to push the pavers out and mess up the alignment. These pavers are a color blend. You can see that they go from a light red on the top of the palette to almost a black down on the bottom. You want your patio to be a random blend throughout, so don't just pull from the top of the palette. As a matter of fact, don't just pull from one palette. Mix them up, and it's a good idea even if you've got a uniform color. So we should stop here, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. We can get this stuff straightened out here. I suppose we could sand and compact this whole area, measure and cut up against the step here. Mm-hmm. Now, once you get the sand down, putting down the pavers goes pretty fast. What do you figure this took us, 3 hours?
Yeah. It's the edges and patterns where there's cutting that really slow you down. So do you want to do the corners first?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
You should check your bond lines before you insert any designs or compact the pavers.
Closer. Right there.
Use a string tied to a couple of loose pavers to see if the lines are straight, but keep it a tiny bit off the patio. Use a pry bar to line the joints up.
In quite a ways.
Check the pattern in both directions,
Okay, right.
checking and correcting every couple of feet or so.
We could have laid edging around the patio before we put down the sand and the pavers, but no matter how carefully we'd measure from side to side, we'd probably still end up cutting off part of the pavers. It looks a lot nicer having whole pavers all the way around. So what I'm going to do is just pull the sand here away from the pavers. We want to go right down to the base. I cut right down along the edge of the pavers like that. And every now and again you may rip up some of the stones. I'll just throw in some sand and smooth all that over. And we just keep moving right on down the line.
All set there?
Yeah, all ready for you. We just slide this edging right underneath the sand. We're very careful to keep it in contact with the base. We start at one end, just kind of work our way down. A little sledgehammer here to help us get this right up against the pavers. And then when we put our spikes in, we do those at a slight angle. That helps draw the edging right up against the pavers.
We want to mechanically tie this edging in with the patio, so when the ground swells from freezing or moisture, then this edging will just move as part of the patio. It comes with a frost heave lip that you need to slide underneath the sand. Well, you might have heard that it's okay to put the edge restraint right on top of the sand, but you don't want to do that. The sand just doesn't make for as good a support, and it will eventually work its way out from underneath the edging.
Okay, we've got enough edge restraint in now so that we can compact the pavers we've already laid. So first we sweep any loose material off the patio. Then we pull a little sand into the gap between the edging and the outside pavers.
Now we run the compactor over the pavers. Now we're just starting the process of locking everything in place. The compactor is pressing the pavers down into the bedding sand, evening out the tops of the pavers and forcing some of the sand up into the joints from underneath. We still have some unrestrained areas, so we have to keep the compactor at least 3 feet away from those.
Once you've run the compactor, you may notice some pavers that have cracked or are flawed in other ways. Now is the time to pull them out and replace them. It's possible to use a pair of screwdrivers to remove pavers. However, you may also be able to rent a specialty tool like this for pulling pavers out of an installation.
Yep. Right there. Okay. I should probably go over these lines with a marker so it doesn't blow off when I cut them.
Okay, I'll tell you what, you mark them, I'll pull them. Now what we're doing here is running diagonal borders across each one of our corners. Basically how you do this is you lay out your design, mark it on top of each one of the pavers, you pull the pavers, and then you cut them, put everything back together again.
Well, now is when it all comes together. What makes a patio like this so incredibly strong is that the joints in between the pavers are filled with coarse sand. That helps lock the pavers together, and after this, they're not going anywhere. So we fill the patio with sand like this, and then we compact it, and then sand it and compact it, and so on and so forth until the joints are filled. The bedding layer is being compacted down, probably about 1/4 of an inch or so. And then that bedding sand is being forced up into the joints. This joint sand that we spread over the top is then being vibrated down into the joints.
You should be able to use the same type of coarse washed concrete sand as you did for the bedding layer. However, you need the sand to be pretty dry, so cover it until you use it or get separate sand in bags. As you're compacting, always be sure to stay 3 feet away from any unrestrained edges. The sidewalk leading to our garage door has a couple of curved sections, so we're incorporating a special flexible edge restraint. We determine the straight sections first, and those are set by the bond lines in the main part of the patio.
Now we attach the flexible edging at one end and move it around until we have a curve that we like. Then we secure the loose end in the middle sections. Finally, we attach the next piece of straight edging. We're using the screed board in a slightly different way here. We made a 3/4 inch notch on one side, and we're letting it ride along the edge. The other end is riding on a regular screed rail. For the soldier course along our curved outside corner, we mark every other paver for a slight taper cut on both sides. This makes sure that we don't end up with large gaps between pavers along the outside edge of the patio.
There are several different tools you can rent to cut pavers. The simplest is a mechanical splitter. However, a splitter leaves a slightly uneven cut. You can minimize the effect of this by holding the paver at an angle. This way, the part of the paver that shows, the top edge, will be fairly straight, even if the cut underneath is uneven. To get a cleaner cut, you need to use some type of saw. This is a dry diamond blade mounted in a heavy-duty chop saw. It's noisy and dusty, but you get a very clean edge.
You can also rent a masonry saw. This has a diamond blade that's washed with water to keep the heat and dust down. It gives a clean, accurate cut and is significantly faster than the dry saw.
When you've got a soldier course making a curve, you might end up with some pretty wide gaps. If you filled these with sand, it might wash away, so we fill them with some of the base material.
We're doing our last bit of sanding and compacting. For areas that you can't reach with a plate compactor, you can use a 2x and a sledgehammer to settle the pavers and vibrate down the sand.
Okay, there's one project using interlocking concrete pavers. As you can see, a paver patio is a really good do-it-yourself project.
Building raised planting beds and retaining walls are great do-it-yourself projects. Now, people that do these lots of times will use wood products, well, things like railroad ties or treated landscape timbers.
And nowadays, wood can be treated to resist decay and lasts pretty long even when it's buried in the ground. But you really have to install it properly or you will end up with rot problems.
So, for do-it-yourselfers, we think a concrete product is a real good idea. Now, there are a couple of brands of interlocking concrete blocks like this on the market, and they work under the same basic principles.
Probably the most important principle is to prepare the base for the wall properly. Now, on a project like this one, where we're only going a couple of rows high with a wall, it's not that big a deal.
Well, the main thing we have to worry about is not disturbing the soil that we'll be leaving in place. And we do this by what we call skimming. And I'm starting out here by cutting an edge around the outside of our planting bed.
The proper technique for skimming out dirt to create the base for a block retaining wall is to run the shovel almost horizontally. Now, you're scraping up the soil you want to remove, but you're not digging up the soil underneath. Now, you should use a shovel with a square nose. Dean likes the one with a long handle so he can stand up straight and kick it with his foot. For me, it's a little easier to use a shorter spade. Now, as we dig down here, we want to check two things. First, we want to make sure that the block is buried about halfway down. And that would be about 2 inches down. Okay, it looks like we've got it about where we want it here in the front.
Our lawn here has a pretty good uphill slope. We figure about 15 inches from the front of the tree ring to the back. So what this means for us is the first row will only go to a point until it starts to die into the uphill grade.
Just keep working around until we've dug 4 inches. That's the depth of a block. Looks good. Oh, we've got a little high spot over here.
Okay,
yeah. As we've been digging around, we've also been checking to make sure our base is level.
Okay, give that a try.
Looks good.
All right.
Okay, we'll put that first block in. Oh boy, what are we going to do about our flange back here?
Oh, I'll tell you, that ground is so hard.
It
How
really
about if I
is.
start busting off some flanges?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, the blocks have a flange on the back here. This is what keeps each row locked into the row underneath. For the first row, you can knock the flange off if you want, or you can just force it down into the dirt a little, and that'll help hold it in place. The ground is so hard here, that just isn't going to work.
To take off this flange, you hit it with a hammer. You can probably use just about any hammer, but we're using a brick chisel. And be sure to wear safety glasses when you're doing this, because chips of block are flying all over the place. Get this over here. Now, you want to be sure to check the level of the blocks as you put them in position. Let's see, a little low right there.
Okay. Now, if you need to make minor adjustments, you just use a little sand to raise the block. Now, you don't want to use loose dirt, because that will settle a bit over time.
Give that a try.
Well, that looks
That looks real good. Grab another one here. Okay, let's check this one out. It's kind of, yeah, it's way low here in the back.
Okay.
Must have dug that out kind of steep. Yeah. Didn't even know it. Okay. Is that spot right there?
Yep. Now, the first first row sets the shape for the whole project, so you want to make sure that you've got it just right. You know, this looks kind of tight in here, but I guess that's the way we need it, isn't it?
I think it looks all right. Let's get this one in here. Now, another thing you want to remember about these is you want to make sure that they're sitting right next to each other. The front edges should be touching, like they are on our block here.
As you finish each row of a wall like this, you need to backfill in behind the blocks. Now, since this wall is so simple, we're going to fill in with a little soil, and then we'll tap it down really well.
And to compact it, I'll just use the end of a 4x4.
It's also real important to have the top of each row clean before you put on the next row. So if there's any dirt, you do need to sweep it off.
To get our blocks ready for the second row, we're knocking off flanges on either side. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we have a curved wall. If we have a straight wall, it wouldn't be necessary. The flange on the back of the block here would line up and lock the block into just the exact position. But we're working with a curved wall. So what we run into there is the entire flange will hold the block back too far. So by knocking off the two sides of the flange, we flip this over, put it in position, and it's in exactly the right spot.
Once we've knocked that little bit of flange off the edge of the top blocks, they fit down squarely over the bottom row.
Now what we've done here is set up what's called a running bond pattern. That's where the joints between the blocks on the second row line right up on the middle of the blocks on the first row. Okay, there you go. Once we get to a straight section of wall, we don't have to knock the flanges off anymore. We can just keep on going. Now our second row will die back into the hillside a little bit further than the first row. So it's time to do a little bit more skimming.
Now what's important here is that we skim out to the exact same height as the top of the bottom row. Here where the first row ends, there was a little gap where we'd skimmed away for the first row. So we just filled it in with a little dirt, tamped it down really well, and then put a little sand over it to level it out. Okay, now we'll just continue along with our second course here until it finally dies into the hillside too.
Well, because we're building a raised planting bed, we needed a little extra fill. So we picked some up in the truck, load it up here in the wheelbarrow, and we'll just haul it over to our site.
Okay, well, that's the procedure. We just keep going along until we finished all the rows the same way. Okay, cleaned off. I guess I can start putting this up here.
Okay, here's another one for you.
Okay.
Boy, you know,
Let's see.
this stuff is so rock hard.
I
I'll
know.
tell you, just about need to pick to get it.
Oh, this is looking up too. Okay.
How we adjusted the back curve here to avoid having any partial blocks on the top row. We just flattened out a little bit to avoid this. Now we can go ahead and fill in the area, plant a tree, and add some flowers.
This is a very straightforward retaining wall project. It took us the better part of a long day, but now we'd like to show you one that's a little more complicated. The project we've got going here is one of the most typical retaining wall projects. Now this house is built on a walkout lot, so there's a good-sized hill over on this side of the house.
Well, this is usually pretty much wasted space. It's too steep to plant anything. It's kind of hard to mow around. So we've got a good solution. We'll put in 3 different terraces. It'll create some flat areas where we can plant some flowers and shrubs, and it'll also hide the air conditioner compressor here.
The walls are going to have 9 rows showing a 4-inch block, a total of 3 feet for each wall. And when you start working on walls that high, you need to do a little more preparation. What we've done is dig down about 6 inches below where we want the wall to start, and we've put in some fill. Then we compact the fill with a hand tamper. Now this tool does a little larger area than the piece of 4x4 that we used on our first project.
Well, we're filling this area in with sand. We had a truck dump off about 3 yards up in the driveway, We're just bringing it down here with wheelbarrows. Now, check to see how we're doing. Hey, Suzanne, we need a little bit over here in this corner.
Okay.
Yeah, throw that in. I'll tap that down a little bit. You want to check this?
You ready? That looks pretty good. All right, that looks good. Well, we've got the base all prepared. It's level all along, and we've set it low enough so that the first row will pretty much be sunk below the ground level in the front. Now, as a rule of thumb, you want to bury the bottom row about 1 inch for every 8 inches of wall height above the ground. We're pretty close to that with 36 inches above the ground and 4 inches below.
For this wall, we need a little bit larger block. This one weighs about 45 pounds, and instead of a flange, it has these 2 little holes for pins that will interlock with the blocks above it. Ready to go?
All set. The first part of this wall is straight, and it'll curve around and die into the hill.
Okay, here's the second one. All right, now we strung a building line to make sure that we're installing the first few blocks here perfectly straight. You want to check them for level?
Yeah. Needs to come down a little bit on this side.
All right. Now you could lift the block up and dig sand out from underneath, but sometimes it's just easier to beat it with a mallet.
Okay, a tiny bit more on this end.
Okay. Try that.
Okay, that looks good. Looks good. All right, we've laid out the bottom course for the whole wall here, including the part of the wall that dies into the hillside. Now, as we said, these blocks have holes for fiberglass pins to lock them to the row above them. We want to put the pins in now so we don't get any dirt in the holes when we backfill.
Now we're backfilling using river rock, and we're placing the rock behind the blocks and the little areas in between them.
Once the areas are filled up, we scrape off the tops to get ready for the next row. And like our first project, you want to sweep the top of the blocks before you put on the next row.
And the blocks have these little holes on the bottom that fit right over the top of our pins. When you stack the blocks, you pull the top block forward, and everything gets snug together. Now we want our second row to die into the hillside here. So we've scooped out this area, added some fill back in, brought up to the level of the last block on our first row.
And start setting the blocks for the second row until the natural grade of the hillside starts to bury them.
Okay. That's good there. Now with our running bond pattern, we need half a block up against the house. Now one way of getting this is using a cold chisel and a fist maul. So what we've done here is just scored this all the way around the outside, as you can see. We put it on the edge here, and we break it. You should get a pretty clean break, but you might have to clean it up just a little bit.
From here on out, we follow the same steps for each row.
Once the blocks are in place, we insert the pins. Then we fill around the blocks with gravel.
Clean off the tops of the blocks and put on the next course. We've got 6 courses total, and this will take a couple of hours.
Now, there are a couple of things we should tell you that we've done on the wall here. The top blocks are called cap blocks. They don't have the little holes for the pins sticking out the tops. You don't want to see that on your top row.
And remember, the blocks are laid out in a running bond pattern. Now, this means that the joints are not lined up row after row, but they're staggered.
Also, there are some adjustments you have to make when working with curved sections. At the bottom of the wall, we have to leave a space between the blocks, but as we move up the wall, the space narrows. At the top, we might even have to chip out part of the block to get it to fit.
Well, that's because the blocks tend to get squeezed together on a curve as they step back.
So far, the wall's taken about a full day.
We'll come back tomorrow, and hopefully we should be able to get the other two levels done. I'll get this stuff raked up here. Okay, get this one in here. Now, it's taken us a couple days to get to this point, and we're not going to kid you. This is a lot of work.
Yeah, the block's heavy, the river rock's heavy, the sand's heavy, the dirt's heavy, even the tamper gets heavy after a while. But we did finish it in a weekend, and now we're just putting in a finishing touch.
Okay, that one's all set.
I'm putting some construction adhesive to hold down the top blocks. This is just a little insurance. The fill behind the top row here will push it forward on the fiberglass pins, but there's nothing but the weight of the block holding it down.
The adhesive helps hold it down. It makes it a little bit less likely it'll be knocked out of position. Now again, once we're done with this terracing project, we have a decent-sized landscaping job ahead of us.
Our basic pattern will incorporate 4-foot panels that step down the hills on the side of this walkout lot. The fence expands to 8-foot sections when it reaches level ground. Privacy isn't a consideration along the back of the lot, so we'll build a lower fence that will frame the view of the woods.
Whatever fence design you end up with, there's a little research you'll have to do as you plan your fence. Contact your local town or city or residential association if you have one of those and find out if there are any restrictions for fence construction.
And check out your setbacks. Make sure that you can build right up to your property line.
And be sure to check for buried cables and pipes. Utilities will come out and mark these with spray paint.
Make sure you know where your property lines are. It's a good idea to have a surveyor come out and stake your property before you begin.
Once you've done this, you can stake out the position for the new fence. We're going to start by locating the posts. You pound a stake in at one end of the fence, you pound a stake in at the other, and you stretch a line between them. The fence is running parallel to the property line, but set 6 inches on our side of it. So we measure over from the stakes that mark the property line to set our fence location.
On the hills, we're going to have stepped fence sections, so the layout on the fence here is a little more involved. Because our design calls for each section of fence to be level and to go down the hill, the layout lines need to be level too. So we ran this first line along the slope or grade of the hill to give us the straight line of our fence. Now we'll put in a taller stake and run a level line to it from the top of the hill.
Right there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, the stake is plumb to the line of the fence, but it's still tall enough so we can run a level line from the top of the hill where the fence begins. We'll use a line level to get this line perfectly straight. All right. Well, that looks pretty good level-wise. Plumb-wise, too.
I'll go. Okay, come a little higher. A little more. A little more. Ooh, perfect.
Right there?
Yeah. Now to mark the location on the post for these lines. On this level section, our posts are 8 feet apart. So we're using a piece of 2x2 cut to that length to help us mark them.
Okay, Joe, I've got this one.
We mark the position of our first post and then measure out on our line to mark the rest of the posts along the level section of fence.
Okay, Jojo, I got it. Now the next section of fence is 4 feet long. So using a level and a 4-foot piece of 2x2, we'll plumb up from our last mark and transfer the 4-foot dimension over to our grade line. Got it there? Perfect. Then we keep measuring off our 4-foot post locations until we get to the end of the fence.
Okay.
For the time being, we're going to remove the baseline, but we'll leave our stakes in place so that we can restring the line when we go to set our posts.
Now, when we first strung our lines, we were actually marking the outside edge of the posts, but we don't want to center our post directly under the line, so we're going to measure over 2 3/4 inches away from the line. That's precisely half the width of our posts. So we just measure it and mark it, and we're set.
Okay, Jojo, right there.
Sure?
Yeah.
We repeat this all the way along this stretch of fence.
Got it. Now we can take down the rest of the building lines. We can also get rid of this tall stake.
Once all of our post holes are dug, we're going to restring these lines to help us locate the posts. And if we leave the stakes in, we won't have to duplicate some of the measuring we just did. The lines will still be in the same place.
Because we knew we'd be doing this from the very beginning, we ran the line out past the end of the fence. This way, we knew the stakes wouldn't get in the way of the holes we'd be digging for the posts.
We have a different layout problem for the fence along the back of the property. We want to come off the neighbor's fence at a right angle, and we figured this using what's called the 3-4-5 method. We measure along the fence 3 feet and make a mark. Is that good?
Let me mark it. Okay, go ahead. Then we measure out 4 feet on a string we've run and make another mark. By moving the string back and forth until the distance between the mark on the string and the mark on the fence is exactly 5 feet, we create a perfect right angle.
Now we use our marks to extend this line all the way across the back. We'll need it for alignment when we put in the posts along here.
Okay, now bring it toward me just a little bit more. Oh, right there, you got it, good. Okay, right there.
Again, our lines represent the edges of the posts, so we offset our post centers back from the lines.
To dig the holes for our posts, I'm starting out with a clamshell digger. The goal here is to get this footing 12 inches wide, 42 inches deep. Digging lots of holes with this tool is time-consuming and tiring, so you may want to rent a power auger for this part of the job.
You can get a power auger at just about any rental center. This is a 2-person tool, but it'll really cut down on our digging time. The power auger is like a giant corkscrew attached to a gas engine. This model takes 4 hands to run it.
Okay, ready, Jojo?
Yep.
Here we go.
You have to pull the auger up every now and then to clear some of the dirt out of the hole. One of the drawbacks of this tool is that you can't control where the dirt spills. So there will be a little more raking and neatening up to do when we're all done.
Even with the power auger, digging post holes is still tough work. Along the back of our lot, the soil is thick and muddy, so we have to clear the bit often.
So are we at the right depth?
Well, we're not even close on this one. That is some real muck. In fact, the soil is so hard here, we're pre-boring with an 8-inch bit, and then finishing off the holes with a 12-inch drill bit.
When you're drilling on a slope, the auger has a tendency to slide down the hill as you start. So it's a good idea to start the hole with a hand digger and then use the auger again. And there will be rocks, or in our case, pieces of concrete rubble. When you find these, you just have to dig them out by hand. We only went down 42 inches on some of our post holes. That's because the posts in the middle of the fence run or the line posts can be a little bit shallower than the end posts, corner post, or post around a gate.
So why do we go 42 inches on our end posts? Well, we've taken a couple of things into consideration. First of all, it's a general rule of thumb that 1/3 of the height of the post goes below ground. In other words, our post will be 6 feet above the top of the surface of the ground, so we need at least 2 feet below the surface.
Except for corner gate and end posts, such as this one. For them, you want at least half the height of the post to be underground. For instance, we're going to have a post here that's 6 feet above ground. That means really we need to use a 9-foot post, so 3 feet of it can be underground. But still, that's only 36 inches.
We decided to go 42 inches below the surface so we'd get below the frost line.
So, what's a frost line, you may ask?
The frost line is how far down the ground will freeze in the wintertime. In our area, most building codes specify that it's 42 inches.
When the ground freezes, the moisture in it expands, lifting the ground up a little. If the bottom of the post is in the middle of the frozen ground, then it will lift up a little and shift, and generally start to get crooked.
By putting the post below the frost line, the ground can heave all at once, but the post will stay in the same place.
Obviously, in warmer climates, the frost line isn't as deep. So the rule of thumb about keeping your line post at least 1/3 of the way underground and your gate, corner, and end post at least halfway underground still applies. Now we can restring the lines that we use to locate the post so we can locate the post again as we install them.
By using bags of dry concrete mix, you can mix up what you need for a post or two. When you mix concrete, always add the water to the dry mix, not the other way around. Then mix it until it's got a thick consistency. Each 60-pound bag makes up about 1/2 cubic foot of concrete. We think each post will take about 4 or 5 bags, so that's all we're going to mix up for now.
There we go. We're off there. As soon as the concrete's ready to go, we position our first post. Our reference point for this post is the retaining wall. We set it 8.5 inches out from the wall. In the other direction, we line up the edge along the layout string. And we also use a 4-foot level to make sure that the post is plumb in both directions. There. Perfect.
Okay,
Let's not move it an inch.
As we start to put the concrete in, you want to be gentle. You don't want to shift the post around at all. We keep an eye on the levels as we fill the hole up, and we also use a pole to remove any air pockets from the concrete.
When you get to the top, fill the hole up a little higher than the ground, and then slope the concrete away from the post a little bit. This keeps water from running down between the post and the concrete.
Once all the concrete's in, we want to brace the posts in position while the concrete cures.
A couple of scrap pieces of 1x will work just fine for this, but be careful not to jiggle the post around too much while you're nailing it in. The line posts don't require as much construction. In fact, you can usually just set them in dirt. You got that?
Yep.
And we also cut a spacer to a length of 92.5 inches. And that's the exact distance between the edges of 2 posts. And we're going to use these all the way down the line.
Okay, Joe, I think this is pretty close. You want to grab the level?
Sure.
Throw the level on that.
You're right. Not bad.
Let me just hit it a little.
Ooh, perfect, perfect, perfect. Let's recheck. Yep, we're ready for dirt.
Great. When the post is in position, we begin shoveling dirt into the hole. Once we've got 3 or 4 inches of dirt in, we pack the dirt down, using the end of a 1x2. Then we keep filling it up and tapping it down. At the top, we slope the dirt away from the post, just like we did with the concrete.
Ah!
Come on. Okay.
You hold that.
Yep.
Thanks.
10 5/8.
Yep.
Okay. All right, with all the posts in now, we want to cut the tops off to the proper height. In this step section of the fence, each post will be 10 5/8 inch lower as we go down the hill. So it's just a matter of leveling across right there. And then measuring down for each post. Okay. Right there. 10 5/8. Perfect.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it on the mark.
Right there, yeah.
Down a little or up? Oh, there we go.
Right there, that's perfect. Okay. Now we can cut the post to height. With 4x6 posts, it takes 2 passes with a circular saw to cut the lumber. Now that we can start installing the fencing material, you'll find that the whole process speeds up quite a bit. Say, could you get that one?
Sure.
The first thing that we'll do is install the stringers. These are the pieces of lumber that run horizontally between the posts. They also support all the fencing material.
With our design, the fence begins 6 inches down from the tops of the posts, and the first stringer is 18 inches down. We measure these dimensions on the uphill side of each post and use a square to mark across. We cut this 2x4 to length, and now we're going to toenail it to the post using 16-penny galvanized casing nails.
Okay, if you hold that steady.
Okay, let me get it on my mark. All right,
I'm
go
centered.
ahead.
Any nails you use on a fence should be double-dip galvanized. If a nail rusts, not only can it loosen up a little, but the rust can discolor the wood and bleed through the paint or stain. And we set these nails below the surface of the wood. Okay, let me get mine on the line here.
Our first stringer was a 2x4 centered on the post.
Yep, just hold
Our
it
next
nice
one
and
is a
steady.
2x6.
The bottom rail here runs parallel to the grade, which means it'll intersect the post here at an angle. So we'll just hold it down here, about 3 inches off grade, and then mark for those angles. Okay. To make the beveled cut, I've set the circular saw to cut at the proper angle.
Pretty good cut there,
Down on my
Dean.
mark there.
I got to go up a little bit.
Okay.
All right.
You tell me when you're there.
I'm there.
We toenail this bottom stringer in also.
As we move along, we're double checking to make sure that we don't knock our posts out of plumb and that our stringers are going in square.
We're still okay, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Our fence sections will consist of 1x6s sandwiched between a couple of frames of 2x2s. Our next step is to establish our first frame of 2x2s on this side of the fence. Okay, I'm in.
Okay.
The top and bottom frame pieces run the full width of the panel. For the top piece, I nail it into the underside of the top stringer with 8-penny galvanized nails. I've set it back 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the stringer. This will center the fence panel on the post. The bottom frame piece had to be marked and cut on a bevel just like we did for the bottom stringer. This piece nails on the top of the stringer.
Now we mark and cut the side frame pieces. These are nailed directly into the posts. These should fit snugly up under the top frame piece. This will help support the top frame and the stringer above it, which is only toe-nailed. The opening for our fence boards is 44.5 inches, but our 5.5-inch wide boards don't fit that space evenly. But rather than have one narrow size board on the end, we can split the difference. And we can center these boards that are full size and then cut 2 narrower boards for either side. And that'll give us some balance and symmetry. To help us keep the board spacing symmetrical, we'll start with the boards at the center. We set the first board on its mark and plumb it down. Then we can mark across the bottom for the length and the angle. Okay. That looks good. You want to hold it?
Yeah. We use 6-penny box nails to nail the board onto the 2x2 frame. 2 nails at the top and 2 at the bottom.
A little bit that way. Ooh, that looks good.
Good?
Yeah. Then we mark, cut, and nail the rest of the boards, working out toward the sides and using a small block to put a 1/4-inch gap between the boards.
Okay, now for the top of the fence. What we're going to do up here is run 2x2s vertically between the top 2 stringers.
We're going to position these 2x2s directly over the 1/4-inch gap on the 1x6s underneath. Then we'll transfer the measurements onto this 2x6.
Okay, I have 5 1/8.
Okay.
Let me run a speed square across here.
And then we'll use spacer bars to position them accurately.
it there?
Yeah, go ahead. Oops, there.
Right
now
there?
we're perfect. Okay, you got
right there,
that.
Jojo. Got it in there?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, that takes care of the first panel. We took this one all the way through just to give you an idea of all the steps involved. Now realize, a panel like this with so many different pieces, there are much more efficient ways of building it.
For instance, it's a lot faster to install all the stringers on all the panels at once, and then come back and start on the frame pieces. That way, you're not constantly changing tools and nail sizes.
And when you cut the frame pieces, cut the front and back pieces at the same time, since they are identical.
And probably while one person's working on the frame, the other can trail along behind and work on the fence boards.
This is going to be a classic picket fence.
Up to this point, when the poster said, the layout and construction techniques are almost identical to the larger privacy fence we built.
There was one minor difference. We were able to use an 8-inch bit for the power auger for digging the post holes for the 4x4 posts.
To attach the stringers to the post, we're going to dado out 1.5 inches on the post and then set the stringers into the notch. This means more sideways cutting with the circular saw. The saw blade is set to cut down 1.5 inches at its lowest point. We run it across the line for the top of the dado and across the bottom line. Then we make a few more cuts in the middle. A hammer breaks the pieces out. And a chisel will smooth out the bottom of the dado. The stringers are attached with 10-penny galvanized casing nails. We cut our stringers out of 18-foot lengths of lumber.
All right, Jojo, tap it down here a little.
Since our posts here are spaced 8 feet on center, this means we have to start a new stringer every 2 posts. We make sure that the joint between the stringers falls right at the center of the post. The classic picket shape for the classic picket fence is a point, and you can probably get the tops cut to the proper shape for you at a shop somewhere.
You might also be able to get pre-cut, pre-packaged pickets. But the nice thing about making them yourself is you have complete control over the style that you choose to create. You also can choose the type of wood.
The design we're creating with our pickets is going to form something of an arc, kind of a dip.
I'd call it a scallop effect.
Yeah, a scalloped effect. Anyway, the taller pickets are going to go on the post, and the shorter pickets will go in the center of the fence sections. And we're going to start along the back fence with these post pickets.
Okay, 12 inches down?
Yeah.
Go square on it once. All right, put it right there. That's perfect.
Oh, that works on the bottom too. It's not too long.
Yeah,
It's good clearance.
That should be good. To attach the picket, we use 8-penny nails. Then we repeat the procedure with the picket on the other end of this section. All right, I have an arc that I like now, and I marked the top of the pickets and where they line up with the top of the top stringer. Now all I have to do is figure out where to cut off the bottom of the pickets, so once we nail them to the stringer, they won't be hitting the ground.
We're going to start with the center picket, and the distance from the top of the stringer to the ground is, Dean, 37 inches.
37?
Yep.
Here you go, Jojo.
Okay.
Oh, these are your marks right here?
Yeah, that's the center mark.
Got it
On
there.
the top one. All right. Got to move this over. Scoot it over.
Okay, I'm on my lines.
Okay.
We've made little spacers that sit on the stringers to give us even spacing. Slip her down.
It's right there. Go ahead and nail.
All right.
Depending on how much time you spent measuring the pickets to establish where the bottom's at, you may not have to even anything out. But we're going to have to cut off some of the bottoms just to even out our lines.
So we're going to snap a chalk line about 1.5 inches up from the ground.
Got it there?
Yes, sir.
Then we go along this line with a jigsaw. Now this is a fairly tough cut. We have to move the saw slowly and firmly so that the board doesn't chip out at the edge.
Now we can start to think about the gate we want here. Gates tend to sag. The side that's not supported by the hinges will drop a little. So you always want to have a diagonal cross piece from the top of the latch side to the bottom of the hinge side for support.
Okay, I have mine down here, Joanne.
Okay.
We position this piece and mark it for cutting. And now that we've got some frame pieces that meet, we can start connecting them directly to each other.
You're set. The pickets that will cover the gate are going to follow the same curved pattern as the rest of the fence, and we'll try to match up the spacing too.
Okay, Jojo, with 5 pickets, we'll have spacing of 3 inches between them.
Okay. We lay out the pickets just like we did on the fence sections, working from the center out. What they'll look like. Now that the pickets are holding the frame pieces together, we can remove the nails that hold the gate down. We also put in short blocks to fill in the spaces at the sides. We'll need these to mount the hinges and latches.
The last elements of the frame are 2x4s running vertically along the sides behind the outside pickets. This strengthens the frame a little bit, plus it does look better. Okay, get my nails on here. In addition to solid posts, you want to have good strong hardware on a gate. Use large corrosion-resistant hinges and long non-rusting screws.
Now we can set the gate in place. We'll use blocks to get it the proper height from the ground, and we'll use 1/4-inch spacers to get it the proper distance from the posts. Okay.
Okay, I got the bottom spacer.
Does that look lined up to you? It looks lined up to me.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me mark it here. Sit tight there.
Yep.
Okay, I'll drill that.
We need to pre-drill these holes. We use a 1/8 inch bit for the number 8 screws.
Have it good and tight?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'll do that one. Let me get the bottom.
So you managed to handle that latch without my help, huh?
Oh, look at how slick this thing works.
This is the simplest kind of latch. The 2 pieces just screw in, one along the post and the other along the gate.
There's a couple of things to think about when working on gates. First of all, make certain there's plenty of clearance under the gate. That's why we hinged this one on the low side. Had we put the hinge up here on the high side, when the gate opened up, the low part of the gate would have been hitting on the ground.
As you work with larger gates, don't be afraid to overbuild a little. Use plenty of cross bracing and bigger hinges than seem necessary. There's nothing worse than a gate that's sagged and won't close or open.
One thing to keep in mind is never make a single gate more than 5 feet wide. That much gate is bound to sag. Instead, break it into a couple of sections and have them meet in the middle. Now, this one works pretty good.
There are a variety of techniques and materials used in chain link fences, and we're going to show you 2 of them in this yard. But before we do that, we've got to get the posts in. These post holes are 2 feet deep and 6 inches wide at the top, but we used a hand post hole digger to make them a little wider at the bottom.
This means that even if the concrete doesn't go all the way down to the frost line, it'll still be pretty stable. The movement of the ground in winter won't push the footing around and knock the fence out of alignment.
We start by setting our corner, gate, and end posts. The walls of all our posts are 0.065 inches thick. Thinner post material probably won't be strong enough. These terminal posts, as they're called, are 2 inches in diameter on the outside and 6 feet long. We set the post so that it sticks out about 50 inches above the ground.
Pretty good shape.
We hold the post plumb while we pour the concrete around it. When the concrete is stiff enough, we make our final adjustments to the post so that it's absolutely plumb in both directions. And on this side, boy, we're fine. We don't need to do anything.
Okay. All right, once we have all of our terminal posts set, we can run a string between the terminal posts to line up all of our line posts. Now, it'd be nice to attach a string directly to the terminal post, but we have to wait for the concrete to cure. So instead, we'll run the string along and attach it to these posts. Okay, you got it there? The line should just touch the terminal posts on the outside, the side away from the house, and we pull this as tight as we can. Now we use this line to position our line posts.
The line posts, which are the posts in the middle of the fence, are 1 5/8 inches OD, or outside diameter, and we set these to a little over 46 inches above the ground. The outside edges of the posts touch the line, and of course, the post has to be perfectly plumb in both directions. Chain link fence posts are set so they're 10 feet apart or a little less, and the spacing should be even along each stretch of fence. Ready for some of this?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. When you set your posts in concrete, you need to make sure that they aren't disturbed for a couple of days. We want to let the concrete totally cure because we put a lot of tension on the posts when we stretch the fence fabric. An alternative to setting your posts in concrete is to use anchoring devices like these. This system is called a shoe and anchor system. It works well on concrete using metal stakes. We've put up the terminal post and stretched a line between them. We can do this right away since we don't have to wait for the concrete to cure. Now we set our first line post. We slip a post driver over the top of the post, position the post, and hit it 2 or 3 times with a driver. The lead weight on the driver pushes the post into the ground.
No, got to move it a little. Okay.
How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Okay, let's see how you're doing here.
Then we check it for plumb. We keep driving it 2 or 3 times and check for plumb again until the post is in the ground down to the proper height, or the mark we set.
Now we take off a little of the sod around the base of the post. We don't need much more than 6 inches out from the post. Then we dig down about 6 inches. This gives us room to attach our anchoring device. To secure the posts, we slip the shoe over the top of the post and down into the hole. Then we drive these anchor blades into the ground.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, let me start pounding on this.
Go to town.
Okay. I gotta get a better spot for this.
Oh, boy.
Here, Jojo, I can finish that off.
We move on and set the line posts on this run before we tighten down the anchors on any of them.
Or a little bit.
Perfect.
Okay.
Must be getting better.
Once our top rail's on, which we'll talk about later, we can make our final adjustments and tighten down the anchors. One of us stands at the end of the fence, looking down the line, and the other one walks along it, getting the posts plumb from side to side and tightening the shoes.
Once the posts are secured, we replace the dirt and sod around the bases. And it's a good idea to water these places quickly so the sod lines will disappear. Besides not having to wait for the concrete to dry, the other advantage to anchoring posts this way is that you can set your post to the exact height that you need. Now with our concrete posts, we have to cut the tops off to the right height.
For a 4-foot-high fence, the terminal post should get cut to 50 inches above the ground, and the line posts get cut to 46 inches. We do this with a 2-inch pipe cutter, holding the bottom of the post with a pipe wrench to keep it from spinning in the concrete. Okay, Jojo, that's it.
Okay, you ready to put on the fittings?
Yeah, let me grab some tension bands here.
Before we go any further, we attach a lot of hardware to the post, and we'll start by slipping some tension bands over the terminal post. These will hold the fence fabric to the terminal post. We use 4 tension bands, one for every foot of fence height. The flat side of the band, the side with the bolt head, goes on the outside of the fence. A brace band goes on the post on top of the tension bands. This looks like a tension band, except that the fitting is centered on the post. The top rail will attach to this. Finally, I put a post cap on top.
Only the line posts get a fitting like this on the top. This is called a loop cap, and the top rail will run through this. We put one of these on every line post in the section. And we put the terminal post hardware on the post at the other end of this run.
Now we're ready for the top rail. The top rail forms the top of the frame that the fence fabric stretches across.
Okay, let me get this through the hole here. Specifically, the top rail will keep the terminal post nice and parallel, where the weight and tension of the chain link always wants to pull the top of the post together. All right, let's slide this through.
The top rail is a thinner pipe, 1 3/8 inches outside diameter. A rail end fitting goes over the end of the first piece, and this is bolted into the brace band. Set the brace band 2 inches below the top of the terminal post and tighten the nut. The ends of the top rail are joined by using an outside sleeve. Also, be sure the rails are tight in the sleeves and the rail end fittings.
Make sure that the loop on the loop cap leans out, away from the house. The fencing goes on the outside of the posts, and the top rail needs to be on that side of the post too.
You'll almost always have to cut your last piece of top rail to length. A few twists with the pipe cutter does this. Just make sure that the last piece is long enough to reach past the first line post. And at this end, we've got another rail end fitting which attaches to the brace band here. Yeah, I think you're right. We're using a 9-gauge aluminum coated wire here. This is heavy stuff, so it should last a good long time.
Now you notice that we're rolling this on the outside of the fence, the side away from the house, or the side looking toward your neighbors. Well, Joe, I think we're a little short.
Yeah, but only by 80 feet or so. It's not too bad. But seriously, fencing fabric comes in rolls that are 50 feet long. So if you have a fence run that's longer than that, you need to weave the 2 rolls together. This place where 2 wires are hooked together is called the knuckle. You have to bend open the knuckle until the last strand of wire is free. And you open up both the top and bottom knuckles. With the wire free at both ends, you twirl it out of the fence with a sort of corkscrew action. Now, some fencing manufacturers will put a loose strand of wire in the roll, so you may not have to unweave a strand. There. Now we'll use this strand to join this first piece of fence to this second piece of fence. But be warned, you may have to take out 2 of these in order to get the strands to match up. The strands twist 2 different ways at the top and bottom, and they have to alternate to mesh together. So the 2 ends you're trying to join have to twist the same way. The strand you weave in between them will go the opposite way and keep them alternating every other strand. I just corkscrew the loose strand back down. It hooks through both pieces and becomes the strand that joins the 2 sections together. With this 9-gauge wire, this is pretty tough because the wire is so stiff. Once the pieces are joined together, you have to close up the knuckles. A pair of pliers will do for this. You have to do it at the top and the bottom of the seam, and pretty soon you can't really see where the pieces have been joined.
All right, now that our fabric's long enough, we can start attaching it to the frame. We'll begin down here where we started rolling out the fabric. Using a short metal bar like this called a tension bar, we'll attach the fabric to the end of the frame. The tension bar slips through the last strand of the fence. Then we pull the end up to the post and slip bolts through the tension bands and around the tension bar. Carriage bolts fit through the tension bands and hold the tension rod in.
Got a ratchet right here.
Okay. We space the tension bands evenly up the post, which here means about every 15 inches.
Oh, there we go.
Now we temporarily tie the top of the fabric to the top rail. We'll use these wire ties later to tie the fabric securely to the framework, but for now, we use just enough to keep the fence from flopping over. And we tie them loosely enough so that the fence can slide along the top rail. Yeah. Got it.
Good. The next thing that we do is what we call stretching the wire. What this means is stretching the mesh from the first post, applying the right pressure, and attaching it to this post. And we'll stretch it, applying as much pressure as we can by hand.
Well, I think that's about it. Now we slip in another tension bar a little ways down from the post. This is just temporary. It gives us a place to attach a winch of some sort. We hook one end of this come-along winch to the end post and the other to the tension bar. Yeah, that's secure.
Now we start pulling.
Keep it going, muscles.
Okay, I'd say that ought to do it right there. Let's test that out.
Okay, Dean, that looks good. You'll know when the tension is right when the fence sticks up about a ½ inch above the top rail. Boy,
we give the winch 1 or 2 more pulls. This will make up for the fabric between the end of the winch and the post which isn't being stretched. Now we pull the fabric apart so that it ends right at the post. All this means is that we have to open up a knuckle at the top and at the bottom and corkscrew the wire out.
All right, let me get this tension bar.
Then we slip another tension bar in the end of the fabric and attach it to the tension bands. And finally, we release the winch and let the fencing even out its tension.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Pull it off.
To keep the fence like this, we tie it off at the top rail and to all the line posts. These short pieces of aluminum are designed to hook around the fencing on one side, loop over the top rail, and tie off to themselves. You need a good pair of pliers, one where the teeth and the jaws are still sharp. Don't use some dull old pair that's been rusting out in the basement for years. Well, let's see here.
In addition to putting ties on about every 18 inches along the top of the fence, we put 4 ties on every line post.
When we installed our post, we were extra careful with our gate posts. These have to be absolutely plumb.
And spacing for a gate is crucial. For a 36-inch gate like this one, we left exactly 39 inches between the insides of the gate posts. This will give us plenty of room for the gate hardware. The hardware consists of 2 male hinges that we attach to one post. A carriage bolt secures these firmly. And always hang the top hinge so it points down. This will prevent the gate from being lifted off.
The other part of each hinge gets loosely attached to the gate. The gate itself is a prefabricated unit. Now we set the gate in place and align it. We think it looks best if the top of the gate is level with the top of the fence on each side. So as you set your posts, you might want to cheat them a little higher if it means your gate can swing a little more freely.
Once the gate is positioned, we tighten the hinges. And finally, we attach the latch mechanism.
When you have a drive-through gate, you need to break it up into 2 sections. The clearance between our 2 posts is 10 feet, and the gate sections are each 57 inches wide.
Joanne put a piece of top rail into the ground. This way our drop bar slides right down into the bar like so and holds the gate securely. If you want more information and tips for your landscaping projects, go to hometime.com and check out the how-to pages there. We put a whole bunch of information on our website with all sorts of outdoor ideas as well as other how-to projects. While you're online, you can also order our landscaping book. It's got even more detailed instructions, plus tons of photos and diagrams. And lots of them are from the projects you've seen on this DVD.